It's a great privilege and pleasure to have a chance to have a conversation with Sir David Willcocks, who I've known on and off slightly in King's for 30 years, over 30 years now. David, tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in Newquay in Cornwall, and I was very, very happy.
When was that?
That was in 1919.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my mother had two elder sons who are now aged 96 and 94, both living in Cambridge, both happy, still playing bridge very well. Both of them got their mind. They're getting less able to move around now. They have a stick, but they're very active. And she didn't have any children during World War One, but I was the next one, born in 1919. So I came into a family which was very happy. They were both bachelor brothers. Both of them very kind to me. They always took me on their long walks with them. And when I was 7 or 8, I'd go on walks, I suppose, of 10 miles, 12 miles along the coast. And they never sort of made me feel I was extra. We used to play ball on the beach and used to go swimming, surfing, all those sorts of things. They were very kind. And I never once had a row with them of any sort. They were very kind.
Sounds very unbrotherly to me.
Yes, and they had a nice friend who came with them, their age. And we used to go along, we used to play golf. I was given a little club when I was about 11, I think, and I used to hit along behind. Then eventually we transcribed to the golf course. And I was a very keen young golfer.
Tell me, did you know your grandparents at all?
No, neither my father's and my mother's grandchildren. I knew my mother's mother, and she was in her 80s. And I went to see her. She was a dear old thing. She was the wife of a country rector who lived in Essex. And how she brought up, I think, 9 children in those days on an ordinary salary, I can't think. I think they all grew their own vegetables. But she was a dear old thing. And she was widowed then and wore sort of white cap and long gown. And we used to go to stay with her. She lived just opposite Holloway College in Englefield Green, Surrey. And she was a dear old thing. And used to probe me about what I was doing on the beach. And seemed very kind.
What did your father do?
Well, he was a bank manager. Of course, he was a very big farming family, and been in the family farm for, I suppose, 300 or 400 years. And it had always gone on to the elder son. And my father was the third son, so he didn't come into the reckoning. And when he was 18, I think he was sent to the bank because they thought this was a good start for everybody. And he started in Plymouth. And worked his way up.
The farming family was in
Wadebridge, yes. A nice farm just north of Wadebridge called Tregorden. It's still in operation and doing well, I think. But my father, I think sometimes used to think he'd love to have been a farmer, but on the other hand, he was a little lame. He had one leg which was shorter than another, through having TB as a boy. And he had a special boot which built him up, which was splendid. And he didn't think that a farmer's life would have suited him. We went to see his elder brother once a year. We used to go, I think, Whitsun to spend the time there. They were very kind. As a little boy, they'd hide eggs for me to find and discover. And it was very much a monastic place. Of course, he'd lost his wife. And he had a son who was only, I think, 20 years younger. And when he lived to be 101, and I think when he was 80, he took his son along to get another pair of shoes because he was inheriting the farm. But it was very embarrassing for him. Will you get my son these shoes? You know? So that was a peculiar thing. And so my father came, I think he was one of 7, and 2 girls there, and 5 boys.
Were either of your parents musical?
No. Well, my father was musical in a sense. He sang with the local church choir, but I don't think he could read music. He didn't know what a crotchet or a minim or a semiquaver was, but he'd got a very good ear. Once he'd heard the basses next to him, it was a small little choir, I think only about 7 people in all, 1 or 2 elderly women, and I suppose 4 or 5 men, that sort of thing. And they got by as best they could. My father, once he'd learnt something, never forgot it. And things like the national anthem, he could sing the bass part absolutely accurately. and he had a very low voice which made him in demand. And he had 2 songs which he sang to people, because in those days you didn't have a television set or anything. People used to come round after he was going to perform, and somebody might read a little poetry, somebody else might sing. My father was always asked to sing.
Do you remember what those songs were?
Yes, one was called Asleep in the Deep, with a very low note in it, which I was allowed to play by the time I was 9 or 10. And also the other one was Crossing the Bar.
Oh yes, famous poem, wasn't
That's
it? Tennyson, I think.
Yes. So he enjoyed singing those, and he was very proud that when the day came when I could accompany him. It was always a nice thing. And there's a dear old woman who used to recite things. They went on much too long. I didn't understand them at all. But they were nice occasions, and my mother was very welcoming. She was the stronger of the two, because she educated us herself, and she wouldn't send us to school at all.
Really? Until what age?
Until I was 8.
Really? So you never went to a kindergarten?
No, not at all. She taught us all to read and write, and she made us, as soon as we were able to, we had to write letters, to everybody. And any present we got, we always have to reply, a beautiful thing. And she'd tear it up and we'd have to do it again until it was right. She was very good.
Why did she do that? Did she disapprove of schooling, or did she enjoy doing...
I think she enjoyed taking it. Of course, the top boys got scholarships to their next schools. The one went to Monkton Combe, the other to Blundell's. And I didn't go to those because they weren't musical, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But she was very good with us all, and she taught us things like mathematics, because we learned to play cards when we were quite young. I think we started with snap and things like that, but by the time I was 7, I was playing whist, because it was easier than bridge. And we played a game called Hearts, which is another version of it, which we enjoyed. And my 2 brothers are both very good bridge players now. They've played all their lives, and I still play with them every week.
You're quite good, are you?
I reckon I'm fairly good. I know most of the conventions, and I don't think I'm a drag on anybody. But we all can play well and enjoy it.
Were both of your parents enthusiastic when they discovered you had a musical talent?
Well, they didn't know about it. They didn't discover it. For some reason, we had an old piano in the house. Well, it was bequeathed, and I think they just used to have it decorative there, like furniture. It wasn't used. But then I think when I was 6, I used to come back from church. I was taken to church every Sunday, sat with my mother, and I wasn't tall enough to see the organist or the choir, so I stood on the seat. The seats we sat on, I used to stand on it so I could look over. My father sang just the other side of a curtain. We were very near the choir, and I was interested in what the organist did. And I'd come back and I'd start thumbing out the tune, easy ones to start with one finger. Then I found that I could quickly put in the cadence and the other things. I suppose I was then 7, and I'd go and give a recital of hymns which I'd heard in church. So they thought I ought to have a lesson, and I think the turning point was when I turned to the tuner, who was hard at work, and said, I've had trouble over tuning that B flat. I was playing bridge on the floor, I'm not wasting time. And he said, how do you know the B flat? I said, I noticed. He said, how do you know? I said, I've played it lots of times. He said, well, what notes are these? And he played 2 notes, I think C and A. I said, C and A. He said, how do you know? Of course, I wasn't looking at it. He said, played another one, it's 3 notes. He said, I've been tuning pianos for 30 years. I've never met a boy or a girl who can do this. And in fact, very, very few of the people I teach could do it. And if I said, this is C, now what is that note? They might be able to tell me, but they wouldn't know which the first note was unless I told them. So I didn't think anything. And he went out and told my mother, who was working in the kitchen, and said, you ought to do something about your boy, because it's most unusual to find a boy that age with what's called perfect pitch. So she said, what should I do? So he ought to have specialist tuition. Is he going to learn the piano? So she said, yes, he's going to learn. And there was a girl who taught in Newgate. When I say a girl, I think she's probably 60. And she took me on. And also, a little bit later, I took up the cello for another reason, that she listened to the wireless and made me listen to the wireless when she heard I was fond of music. And Walford Davis, who was then master of the King's music, said one week, said that anybody who knows a musical little boy, do get in touch with your local organist, because there's a shortage in our cathedrals now of good boys. And that's something I leave with you this week. It was a coincidence, of course my mother hadn't thought of it. So she wrote to Sir Walford Davies. She didn't know him at all, and enclosed a stamped addressed envelope and said, what should I do about my little boy, because he's 8, he's got perfect pitch, and he seems to sing in tune as far as I can tell. She wasn't musical at all. So he said, well, if he's really interested in what I had to say, bring him up to my next talk. They're on Tuesday afternoons between 2 and 3. It's half an hour, but we'll bring him up and let me know when you're coming. So my mother said we'd like to come on, I didn't know whether it was Tuesday week or Tuesday 3 weeks, but we made an appointment.
Where was it? Where was the talk?
In the big broadcasting house.
Gosh, so it was going up to London.
A long journey from Cornwall, so she came up with me. And when we went in, we were ushered in, and they said, yes, Sir Walford is expecting you. So go knock on his door and see he's not on broadcasting till 2:30. So I knocked on his door. He said, come in. And he said, where are you from? I said, I'm from Newquay in Cornwall. Oh, I didn't know there were any musicians down in Cornwall. So I said, yes. So he said, I'd like to, would you like to sing something to me? I said, well, I haven't brought any piece with me. Well, I'll play to you and see if you enjoy it. And he played a piece, and he looked at me. He said, could you hear God speaking to you when I played that piece? I listened hard, but I couldn't. And I didn't know what to do because my mother was in the next room. So I said, no, I'm afraid I couldn't. I loved the real playing of it. It sounded beautiful. So he said, I'll play another piece. And he then played dee-da-dee-da-da-dee-da-da-da-da-da. I said, I've heard that. I'm not sure what it's called. But that reminds me of church, because I think that's where I heard it. So he said, did you hear God that time? Well, not exactly. I hope that he was present in a sort of way. I don't know whether he was over there. He was in this room with us. And I felt that was a step up. So he said, well, they were very kind. So then he said, I'm going to give you some ear tests. He didn't tell me whether I was right or wrong, but I knew I was right. So he said, well, a very promising ear. He said, I'd love to have you in my choir at St George's, Windsor, but the last we're full at the moment. But I've got a great friend at Westminster Abbey called Ernest Bullock. He said, I'm going to write
Bullock, is it?
Bullock, B-U-L-L-O-C-K.
Yes.
He was organist of Exeter Cathedral, and I'm writing to him to suggest that he gets in touch with you to say whether he can hear you, because I think you've got the right sort of approach. You seem to enjoy music, and you're learning the piano. So what I would suggest is that you wait for a letter, and the next letter came from Ernest Bullock saying, please bring your little boy up to London. So I went up when I was 8, and he did the same thing. I went into the song school, Westminster Abbey, which is just off the cloisters. He was very kind, and he said, I'd like to hear you sing something. Well, this time I was prepared, because I knew he'd asked me to sing. So I said, I don't know any hymns by heart. I know a song I learnt at school called The Keeper. The keeper did a shooting go, and under his coat he carried a bow, all for to shoot at a merry little doe, among the leaves so green, oh, to my ho, do. It's quite a long song. So he said, give me the copy and I'll play for you. I said, oh no, do you mind if I play for myself? He said, what, do you want to play? So I said, well, it's quite difficult, because it's got 2 sharps in it, and also there's a difficult 4-part chord toward the end. I can generally get it right. So he said, yes, do, by all means. So I played for it, and he seemed quite impressed on it. You had to show yourself up for that difficult chord, didn't you? He said, one day you'll be able to play that really well. I thought, I'll remember that. But he was very kind. He didn't tell me immediately, but he said, I think you're a little bit young. You're 8 now. I think I'd like you at 9. Would you be able to come then? I said, well, I'll ask my mother. I think she's keen I should come. He said, you know, you'll have to board in London. You'll be away from home. So I said, well, I don't know. I'm sure that'll be all right. So it was left like that. He wrote a very nice letter saying he was very pleased with my boy. And he said he was going to tell the Sir Walford Davies that he'd accepted me, and he thought I was going to start when I was 9, in the summer term, which would be nice. Where it's nice and people can play cricket and that sort of thing. And one other thing he said, that Sir Walford had said to him this little boy is very good on the piano, but he ought to learn a stringed instrument as well. So would you tell Mrs. Willcocks that she ought to make sure he learns a stringed instrument? Well, she talked around a bit and somebody gave an old small cello to us as a present. And I started having lessons from a woman who lived in Port Scatho, well in South Cornwall. Well, she had to come about 30 miles, I think, each time to teach me and then go back again. And I was just beginning, really. And she was very kind. It would be great use to, if you ever play in an orchestra, to have learnt at this age is a great thing. So I started playing the cello, and I had lessons for a whole year. And I think I did improve my playing. And then I started at Westminster Abbey in June 1929, and had a very happy time there. I was very homesick to start with, because we were a boarding school. I didn't sleep one wink that first night because we were within earshot of Big Ben. I heard every quarter strike, and all the other boys were fast asleep. But I was very unhappy that first night, and I thought of home. I thought of my mother being lost without me because there'd be nobody at home for her. But I got through that. So then we began our daily rehearsals, which I thoroughly enjoyed because we were doing music. But it was all strange to me. I'd never heard it. And Ernest Bullock was unusual in that we never got any training such as I give now and most people give. We just started on the next anthem or the next service. That was our training. And you learnt your discipline through training. I've rather hankered after that all my life. I've never given vocal exercises to a choir in my life. And later when we come on to training choirs, I've got feelings about that. I mean, so much time wasting la 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 la, improving the voice. Why not learn music? If you did some music and do your exercises through that. However, I had some very happy years there. An average day, you started either singing the morning service or the afternoon service. The choir was a double one, A choir and B choir. And if A choir sang the morning services, B choir would do evensong, next day you would reverse. Because in those days they had 2 services every day, except one when the boys had games. I mean, very few cathedrals have that now, and some cathedrals just have 1 evensong and no more. So we really did get exposed to church music there. The audience was very small sometimes, because there was the dean or the canon there, and we were made to feel that we were part of a long tradition. And from an early age we were told that this choir had been going for something like 600 or 700 years, and that we were the ambassadors, we'd be training the next choir, and we weren't just something that was thought up yesterday. And that view was expressed in other ways, and we were taken round Westminster Abbey and shown all the statues of the Prime Ministers going there, which showed that the Abbey was in touch with what was going on, because people think the Abbey is all just a church, but it's got living history. We were taken to see the graves of the musicians, Henry Purcell, Croft and John Blow, all the organists of the Abbey, they're buried there. And if we sang one of their anthems or services, we'd go and look at the grave. And then we'd also go sometimes, but not always, to see poets who'd written words for the anthems. I mean, people who are commemorated in the Abbey. There are many poets there in Poets' Corner, in the South Transept, and that made us interested in.
And there was did you say there was Handel's bust as well?
Yes. Also, which struck me, was a lovely bust of Handel, which is in the South Transept, looking towards the choir. And I was on the left-hand side of the choir, so look at the organ, and I used to look at Handel and wonder if he was hearing it. I was sort of imaginative in those days, and used to sing particularly well if he was there. And so that was an added interest. I mean, I loved the Abbey, and I loved looking back on it. I mean, I just remember the daily routine with great pleasure.
Did you do other kinds of, I mean, in between the music you must have been doing French and mathematics and...
Oh yes, we did the usual subjects. And I did a little French, and we had the usual things, arithmetic and Latin, yes, we do. That was for everybody. And I was fairly well up, I think, in standard. I mean, I wasn't a dullard, and I wasn't very brilliant. I was just average. I made my way up. And the senior choir, which was the best from A and the best from B, combined on Fridays and Sundays to sing the maiden services. So well, very well. You during the week you learned what you were going to sing for the weekend, which was more important, because more people came. And the service I particularly remember was the service on Armistice Day when we sang around the grave of the unknown warrior in the nave. And they'd tell us a little about World War I, how certain people were buried. And there was one unknown person, he could have been any nationality, whose body was removed to the Abbey. They don't know if he was German or English, but he's buried there. And a lot of widows would come to that service, and some would come up to me and say, "It's very good of you to sing on this occasion. There will never be another war. You'll be grateful for those people who gave up their lives in this world war which we commemorate. They'll never be forgotten." And some said they lost their husband or they lost their son. It was very moving.
Were there any teachers in particular in that first school in Westminster Abbey who you remember as being?
Yes, I remember them all. I mean, the man who taught mathematics, a chap called Perry, who came from Cornwall, a chap called Holroyd, taught us English, and the headmaster was Goodwin. He was an important person, because we had this thing called Stars and Stripes. If you work really hard, you got a star after your name, went up every week. If you did something naughty, you got stripes. Well, I'll come on to you with that, because every now and again we've given, I think, a shilling pocket money a week, which is supposed to last us, so that bought you a stamp or a postcard or something. Many of us used to, and I used to save up my money, and we went to a little shop near Westminster Bridge, and if you paid the man a little bit, I think it was sixpence or threepence, he'd let you look through his spyglass up at the big bed, and you could see the top moving. It was a great excitement for us forward. And he was the chap who one day offered me, a cigarette or two. I said, yes, fine. He said, you can get hold of some matches, can you? So I took them back and I shared them out amongst the boys. I said, you know what I've got? We're going to the loo tonight after lights out and we'll smoke. So we did that, and of course the matron came through later to make sure we were all asleep and smelt the smoke, but she didn't do anything about it except that we got a little off and talked something had been spoken, no more. But then a little bit later I smoked again and took a risk, and I saw we all pretended to be asleep, and I had one eye open like that, and I noticed that she walked along our rows of our things, and she felt in all our pockets and found a packet of cigarettes in my pocket, and went a whole way along the line. So I thought that's peculiar to search without our permission, but I thought no more about it, and she reported me to the headmaster. He said, now I've given you a warning about this. We cannot have you smoking. Of course, just imagine picking up the daily paper and seeing a picture of 4 choristers wearing red cassocks and their ruffs, I mean, like that. Nobody would come to the Abbey again. It's a really serious offence. You must avoid that. It is something, if you take my advice, you will avoid it later in life. Well, I've said, I'm very sorry. So he said, well, I said, if you're caught again, he said, it must be the end. Because we can't have boys smoking in Westminster Abbey. If it got into the press, we'd be in awful trouble. So I sort of thought, well, about a year later, I think when I was 12, I thought we'd have another party. And I risked it because I didn't think the headmaster would remember. And we had the same sort of party. And this time, I was sent to see the Dean. He said he's a very busy man, he's constantly in touch with royalty, so he won't see him straight away, but he'll let me know when he can see me. Well, the thing that I could go to see him came, and he said, why have you come to see me? I said, I thought you were going to tell me why I've got to come. So he said, have you been smoking? So I said, yes. He said, has the headmaster warned you about smoking? Yes, I think he did actually, some time ago. It was a long time ago now. He said, it's very bad for you. And he said, God gave you a voice. Do you know what for? So I said, I didn't know. So he said, it's to sing God's praises with that voice. So I thought, I'll remember that. So I said, I've been doing that. I love the Abbey, I really do. So he said, well, have you anything else to say? I said, well, it just happens, I remember, we don't always listen to sermons, it depends. I mean, if it's a good preacher, we'll listen. If it's a bad one, we go to see for their little games. But I remember a Welshman, I think he was, came about 5 or 6 weeks ago. I remember what he said. He said, whatever you've done wrong in life, if you're prepared to get down on your knees as soon as you can and pray to Jesus, say, Jesus, I've sinned. Will you please forgive me? And always, you don't hear from Jesus, but you know you've been forgiven. And I looked at him and I said, do you believe those words? He said, yes, I do. I said, well, doesn't that make your task easier? So he looked at me and didn't know what to say. He said, I suppose it does. He said, if I did let you off, I mean, you're going to smoke again. Oh no, I won't smoke again, because I know it's bad for the voice, and I've reiterated. I said, he said, have you anything else to say? I said, I don't want to get anybody into trouble, but I think you ought to know that the matron, who's paid by Westminster Abbey, went and felt in our pockets without our knowledge. After we were asleep, or supposed to be asleep, I saw her go down the list, and I saw her take something from my pocket. Now, you wouldn't like that in the paper, would you? If you picked up the paper tomorrow morning. No.
Blackmail, David.
Well, I didn't think...
You learnt the arts early on.
He said, I think we shake hands on this one. You won't speak again, will you? I said, no, I won't. You've been very kind. And I've loved my time at the Abbey. I've loved everything about it. Seeing the Prime Ministers, seeing Handel, seeing everything. I've poured out my soul to him. He said, well, we'll always remain friends. And I've always regretted I never had a chance to see him again. You know, I left you and never thought any more about it. All sorts of people in my life have helped me at crucial stages. I mean, one was that dean who let me off, because I just can't imagine what would happen if I was sent home to my mother and father, who were so proud of me. And they told everybody in Newquay that I was singing in Westminster Abbey Choir. They said, if you listen next Tuesday, you may hear his voice, because even songs being broadcast. And I had another little trick, which I played, because I was right underneath the microphone. I said, so that you know I'm well and happy. As soon as you hear the dean say, here ends the second lesson, you hear a little cough like that, that's from me. Because I can cough right into the microphone, you'll know I'm well. But don't ever tell anybody, because otherwise they'll get very angry. So I did that, I suppose, 2 or 3 times. My mother heard it and wrote, I heard you all right. So those sort of things, I was always looking for excuses to get home, because I didn't write all that regularly, and my mother loved to know I was all right. So those are some of the highlights I remember.
Did you, apart from music, which you obviously loved, did you have any other hobbies at that stage?
No, I was fond of games. I mean, we didn't have very good games places. We used to go to Vincent Square, a long way away. We weren't allowed to play in Dean's Yard, which is a lovely courtyard, which is reserved for Westminster School. So, I mean, we did play cricket in a sort of way, in a little alley behind the choir school, and also up on the roof. And my very first day or second day, I was playing cricket in this place down by, they practiced the piano just behind the school, and we were playing, and I think about 4 of us playing. One boy hit the ball out over while knitting. They said, Willcocks, you're young, he went to go and fetch the thing, so I didn't know how to do it. I had to climb up over a thing, and then I dropped down from something that I suppose about 4 feet high onto what looked like a stone wall, and I could see the ball lying there. So I managed to climb up over the thing. I got to the top and I thought, dare I jump? I thought, yes, there's any way down, because they couldn't cling onto it. So I jumped. And everyone's horror, I went through glass. They hadn't imagined there was any glass there. I couldn't see it. It was all covered with dust, you know. And I went right through this glass down into the laundry room, and landed in a whole lot of laundry.
That was lucky.
But you see, everyone was terribly frightened. The boys thought I was killed, because I'd just disappeared. And they went and told the headmaster immediately, who sent the man down to unlock the laundry door. And he said, are you all right? So I said, yes. He said, aren't you cut? So I said, no. I just fell feet first, went through. I thought I was just going down onto a ledge. So he said, we are very lucky. He said, you better go and see the matron straight away. And she examined me all over, and no cuts of any sort. So they weren't allowed to play in Walgett for a bit, and then he came back after a time. But I think for years after it was known as Willcocks' War. So that was another thing, because if I'd been thrown out of the Abbey my first day, you'd never get over that, I don't think.
No. I mean, you mentioned you liked games. Did you go on later to play many games, or?
Well, we didn't have enough. I think we played...
In your next school? In Clifton?
In the next school, yes. When I went to Clifton, I was very keen then.
What did you play?
Well, I played well, the usual house games. I mean, we played cricket in the summer and football in winter. But I specialised in cross-country running, because I had quite a good, I suppose, all the singing gave me a good thing. And we ran up to, I think, 7 miles once a year, along Penville, which I got into the school team for 2 years running. Last year I was 7th and third year I was 3rd, which made a difference. We used to go to run against Sherman, Cheltenham, and various schools, and I took part in that, which I enjoyed very much. I made a lot of friends through it. But towards the end of my time at Westminster Abbey, I ought not to overlook the fact that Ernest Bullock was very kind to me, because when I was 12 or 12 and a half, my voice changed. And you lose it, you can't sing. I felt dreadful, but he'd let me in to sing until I was 13 and a half. I said, I don't know what to do. He said, I feel terribly sorry for you. He said, you needn't feel sorry. It's the best thing that could have happened to you. I said, I'll tell you why later. Because most of the boys will go on singing every day till 13 and a half, but you're going to learn the organ. You're sufficiently good on the piano already to start learning the organ. I was tall then. I think I was big enough to reach the pedals quite easily. So he said, I'm going to teach you myself. He said, we'll have the first lesson on Westminster Abbey organ. I've got arrangements for you to practice when you want to, at a church round the corner, just occasionally on the Abbey. He said, and all the time they're spending on their singing, you'll be doing organ. He said, it'll send you a marvellous stead for your next school. I don't know where that'll be, but you know it'll give you a very strong position. So I went and had lessons from Ernest Bullock. He never charged my parents 1 penny for it. And I always thought of a very kind man to do that for a boy. And when I left, he said, you've been a very good boy in every way. You've been the naughtiest we've ever had, falling through that way. He said, you know, we really thought the end of the choir had come. But you've got over that very well. And he said, I think you'll have great things. You've got a very good memory, because whatever you've learnt on the piano you know by heart, and whatever organ piece you've learnt, even if it's quite a short one, you play to me by heart each week. So it shows it's not only going in there, but you can reproduce it. That has been very valuable. And during that year, he taught me a lot of Bach, and I learnt, I think, he always said it was 12, but I think that included the short ones, the major preludes and fugues, which you can offer to your new school. At what stage it was decided I should try for Clifton, I'm not sure, but certainly during that year, because only 2 schools in those days, you wouldn't believe it now, with every school in the country offering a music scholarship. The only ones that offered one was Rugby and Clifton, and Clifton followed suit. And they had a very good musical tradition there, and that being nearer my home, that was thought advisable. Then gradually during that year, as I worked, people made associations, and it was definitely decided I'd try for Clifton. And there was a very musical boy at Christ's Hospital called Ivor Keys, who was the same age as I was.
Keys?
Keys, K-E-Y-S. And he had written a symphony which had been scored beautifully, and was very good on that side for his age. I think he was only till 13 or something. So we can't have Willcocks playing against Keys, because we shan't know who shall win. Because I was slightly the better player, I think, and he was the better person on paper. So, incidentally, I did meet him later, and we became very good friends for the rest of our lives. But Ernest Bullock did teach me these things, and it was decided I should try for Clifton. And I went for my trial, I think in 1933 end, because I started there in 34. And I met the wonderful director of music called Douglas Fox. He was a man who had a brilliant record at the Royal College of Music and at Oxford, and went through life with everybody saying he's going to be the great pianist or organist, and the next generation he'll be playing in every country representing England. And he had his arm shot off in 1917, And he was wounded there, and he went to see a doctor, and the doctor said, I think I have to take your arm off. And the doctor said, need you do that because I am a pianist and organist. He sort of, I'll take second advice, and he got another advice from the doctor, said, was your choice, it's gangrene or risk of death, or taking it off. I should take it off. And they did, they operated then and there. And Douglas Fox returned to England. Of course, hundreds of his friends wrote. The only person who didn't write to him at once was the director of the Royal College of Music, who was Sir Hugh Allen, who was also professor of music at Oxford as well. And he didn't write for a whole week. And Douglas Fox thought how peculiar, because he'd been so kind to me. All these others have written saying, they'd gladly give up their thing if I would help them out. But this man didn't write. And in the end he wrote saying, Dear Fox, I haven't written before, because I wanted to try something out, just to convince myself. He said, last week I played, I think it was New College, Oxford organ, every day this week at Evensong, before Evensong and at the service. And nobody said anything to me. I had my right hand tied up in the sling, and I got through. So I can do it without practice. Think what you can do with practice. Well, it buoyed Douglas Fox up, and he thought, that's given me something to work for, and he practiced and became very accomplished as a one-armed organist. And this comes in a later talk I shall give you, how I was able at long last to thank him many years later, because for all that he gave me. Well, he gave me the organ scholarship, he gave me the usual tests, I had to accompany, play my pieces, and I offered to play by heart certain works which I'd learnt. I think there were about 4 of them then, but I've been able to offer the same ones to King's years later when I came. And I played, and he was very impressed and tested my ear, did all the right things which directors of music do, and thought I was very promising. So I arrived at Clifton and was amazed at what he could do. He's a very nervy man, and Brian Pippard, who was a friend of mine at Cambridge and a school friend of mine,
physicist.
Yes, Sir Brian Pippard, tells of the story where he was in a practice taken by Douglas Fox, and some small little boys ragging around, and Douglas Fox lost his temper and went up and pulled his hair like that, and then he was full of, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that. And he knelt down in front of the boy and said, now you can pull mine as hard as you like. And then the little boy started to tug. He said, no, not as hard as that. Well, it just shows the sort of man he was. He was so modest and so kind to people. Well, I learnt a lot from him, particularly his ability to play the organ. And most people play either on that manual or this manual, but he had big hands, and he could play with his thumb on one manual and the accompaniment on the top. So he played trumpet tunes, yum pum pa pa bum pa bum pa pa, playing the accompaniment there with the tune there. It was amazing. You never believe it. And he was a very good teacher. He never let anything pass. He said it's got to be right or wrong. He said you've got great ability, and you can almost sight read as well as you can play the finished piece. You've got to get it absolutely right. And things like score reading, while you read for a full score, you have to transpose some instruments. I got quite good at that through his practice. And also, he made me improvise a bit. He said, now, if you're an organist, as you probably will be, you'll find that sometimes the priest goes up with the blessing, to give the blessing from the altar, and there's an interlude where you've got to fill it up with music. I'd like to hear you play in B-flat minor for a bit, then I'd like you to gradually, over half a minute, to make your way to F major, to see if we can do that without people downstairs wondering why you were changing key. He picked all those sort of things he taught me. And then when I was 16, I think, or 17, 16, I took my ARCO, which is normally taken by people 19 or 20, and Ivor Keyes was taking his at the same time. So he said, you better take yours, and I got through. And he said, well, in a year's time you can take your FRCO. It's very unusual for school children to take an FRCO. I don't know how many were, but I took that, and we both did well and got through. And I was always grateful to him because he prepared me for the next test, which was going to get admission to a university. Gradually, while I was at Clifton, they were talking about which university we should go to. And I was destined for King's for various reasons. Douglas Fox knew various people very well, and he particularly advised me to go to King's. Of course, thought the organ was marvellous for me, and that I would enjoy it there. And Boris Ord, who was organist of King's, had been at Clifton himself as a boy. It was another draw, although he said that could work against you. I mean, you might feel you oughtn't to appoint another Clifton unless you were quite exceptionally good. So it was agreed I should try for King's, and he then started on the sort of tests I would have to do if I went to King's. And that was all very valuable, all doing that on top of ordinary school things. And I took the ordinary exam, I forgot what it was called, ordinary thing at 16, and then something at 18, and A-levels all
A-levels, yes, O-levels,
and I
A-levels.
did all those like anybody else. So that posed the question. I loved Clifton. I made many friends there, which I've kept. And then in a year's time after I left, I had a year to fill in.
Can I just ask a couple of
Yes.
further things about Clifton? Apart from the ordinary schooling and the games,
Yes.
were you interested in anything else, like
Yes, Scouts.
Scouts?
Yes.
Yeah.
We had a headmaster, a scoutmaster, who was very keen, a man called Hardcastle. His father was a canon of Canterbury, a very nice man who said, you will enjoy, first of all, being a cub for a bit and then being a full scout. And he was a very good choir trainer, took us off camping. And things we did when we were there were climbing in the gorge at Clifton, that wonderful gorge. And also we went out to the caves on the Mendips, which were very exciting. And you go down with a rope round you in case you got lost. In some of those caves, if you go at the wrong time, they get flooded. You get killed. But we were very careful. We had very good scoutmasters who took us over things. And things I remember to this day was Scout's Law. I mean, I didn't learn the Ten Commandments or anything. I just, let me just think. I will tell it to you in a moment. No, it'll come back to me in a moment.
Okay, we'll
Yes.
come back to that.
Yes. Trust
I never learnt them, so...
Oh, right, yes. Trust in all, helpful, brotherly, courteous, kind, obedient, smiling, thrifty, and pure as the rustling wine. I remember all that comes out. It's always been with me this moment. Trust in all, helpful, brotherly, courteous, kind, obedient, smiling, thrifty, and pure as the rustling wine. So that is. And I love that, the open air thing, and one got a lot of exercise on those things.
Has walking been a hobby of yours?
Yes, always. Yes, I preferred it to driving the car. Now at long last I've had to give up my car. I haven't had an accident. My wife thinks at my age I ought to get used to walking only. I still go on a bicycle occasionally. But I think that's a good way of getting around. Any long journeys I do by train or wait to see when I was going that direction.
One other thing that I'd like to just ask you about, when you described very vividly one of the people who was interviewing you, asking you whether you could hear God.
Yes.
And then the rest of your life has been to do with churches and church music.
Yes.
I wondered what the evolution of your own religious
Well, I was confirmed like anybody else, I think around about 15, 16 I think. It didn't mean much to me. I sort of learnt whatever I was supposed to learn and went. And the man came, put his hand on my head. I was kneeling at the time and I couldn't notice. He had very dirty shoes. I thought, if you're confirming something, you ought to clean your shoes. That's what people look at when they're being confirmed. And I don't think I changed my ways at all. I always regarded it as something rather like, do you believe in God? I mean, you go to church. That doesn't mean you believe in God. But you do your best. And whenever I've been in a position playing the organ, I've always thought somebody in this congregation is really holy. I better make it as good as I possibly can so that they get refreshed. And I felt my job at King's, and wherever I was always Salisbury or Worcester, was to make the choir as good as possible, and it would help people reach God. I mean, even if their God was different from mine.
What was your God?
Well, there isn't one. I mean, I think, I don't believe he created the heavens and the earth. I mean, any more than anything else.
It's interesting because this was roughly what Stephen your successor, later
Well, good.
successor?
I actually thought most honest people, most, I'd say 9 out of 10 people, or 19 out of 20 would be their answer if they were honest with themselves. I mean, I don't believe that God's judging me now on what I say. I was taught all the stuff by somebody. I didn't ask him, do you believe it? Because I can't believe that most clergy believe everything they profess. I mean, I'm not doubting the sincerity of the chaplains and deans of kings, and bishops. I know 1 or 2 nice people, but I think they would have been, whether they were believers in God or not, they're just good people with a good heart, kind.
What do you think of the popular view that music, someone like Mozart, in a sense, seems to give you a sense of the transcendent?
Oh yes, I think certain people are very gifted, very gifted. It doesn't come from God. It comes from their own innate ability. Sometimes it comes from parents or your descents. In your early days, I think, age 5, 6, 7, what you absorbed then, I think, see, my father and mother were absolutely unmusical, yet they encouraged me. It was the encouragement that prompted me to go for music. And music seemed to be the right thing to do at university for me, because I was gifted in that direction, but not gifted at history or anything else. I was average, and I felt I did the right thing because it was what I was good at, compared with other people.
Well, tell me about, you presumably came up for an interview, did you, at King's?
Yes. Yes, this was in 1938, and I came up, and I'm not sure how many others there were. I was certainly the only FRCO trying.
That means Fellow of the Royal College.
Royal College of Organists,
yes.
Which most people take here at age 20 or 21 or something like that. And I also had other things behind me. The gap year I spent it at the St Nicholas College, which is part of the Royal School of Church Music. And it was then stationed just outside London in a place called Chislehurst. And the object of the teaching the Royal School of Church Music was to make people prepared to take on the role of organist in a cathedral. So we learnt a lot about liturgiology, the history of the Bible, and singing the Psalms. We learnt about all the history of the Psalms and how the meanings got twisted, and which are bad translations, which are good translations. And we were taught the rules of accompaniment, that you've got how to get on with vicars, because at that stage there always has been the rows between vicars and organists, organists who are trying to take the church over through their music, and vicars who said music's just something, all that, awful rows that we got used to dealing with clergy. I've never argued with a clergyman yet, because I think they know I'm prepared to give and they're prepared to give.
When you came up for your interview, was it Boris Ord who...
Yes, Boris Ord was in charge. I was slightly frightened of him. I knew he was no Cliftonian. He didn't treat me differently from anybody else. I didn't hear the others being examined. He first of all said, I'd like to hear you play a piece. I was able to offer quite a lot of Bach, Friedels and Fugues by heart. I said, you can choose. He looked like that. So, and Douglas Guest was in the organ scholar at the time. And he said, which you going to play? I said, Boris has asked for the, I don't know which it was, said the B minor. So he said, all right, give me the copy. I said, no, I don't need a copy, I'm playing by heart. He said, what, for an exam like this? I said, yes. I couldn't see there was any difference in giving a recital in Birmingham Town Hall, which or something like that. So I played without music. Of course, you can't be seen up there except for the organ scholar who's turning over for you. So I played my bit, and Boris seemed happy. So then he tackled me, he said, I'd like to hear you improvise. That's, if I give you a theme, I'd like to hear you play on that theme for 2 or 3 minutes. And I'd like you to start in a certain key, and then in a different key, to make sure I could modulate comfortably. And then he gave me some score reading to do, which I found quite easy. So I'd done all these things in the FRCA exam. It was just another FRCA exam. Then he said the most important thing, I think, is choir training, because if I'm ill, your job is to train the choir. And I think at this stage, I was telling John Shepherd was sitting in the back stalls, I think with John Raven or somebody, with 3 or 4 people sitting in the candlelight with their gowns over them, almost asleep, they were taking their things in. And he said, first of all, I'm going to give you a piece which the choir, I hadn't heard such a beautiful choir in my life. I'd sung Westminster Abbey choir, I'd sung the sort of choir at Clifton, but I'd never heard a choir like this. The tone was beautiful. I couldn't say that. He said, I want you now to imagine that in 10 minutes' time you're going to broadcast that piece to the whole nation and to the whole world. I want you to work with the choir, they're all yours.
The choir were there?
Yes.
I see, during your exam. Yeah.
Yes. He said, you said just what you like. So I said, okay, we'll sing through it. And my heart sank because I'd never heard singing like it in my life. The tone was good, the boy's tone was good. And Boris, who has his own rasping, gravelly voice like that, I couldn't think I could teach the boys to sing so sweetly. And the men all blended well. And it was peculiar, of course, in most choirs, there's a different age group. I mean, here you had a third of them would be in their first year, another third would be in their second year, another third would be in their third year. So you had people of different years all singing together as one choir. So they sang through it, and it was perfect. So I thought, I'm not going to let this go. So I just had to think quickly. And I turned to the boys on Decana, that's that side, and I said, now, if you were going to broadcast that and you were directing, what would you do? One little boy said, I'd take it a bit faster. I said, that's a very good point. Well, take that and keep that in mind. Any other points? And the little boy said, and smiling at the tenors, the tenors were a bit loud in one bar. I saw them sort of smile and wink at each other. And I said, right, we'll listen up to the tenors then. And I found one other thing from those three boys. I said, now we're going to do what the boys have suggested. This is the whole art of choir training. Make people do it for you. So we sang it through, and it was exactly as it was the first time. Hadn't altered at all. So I said, who thought it was better that time? Nearly all the hands went up. So I said, we learnt something of the speed. I'll get the speed right this time. Then I still knew I had another 3 or 4 minutes, so I turned to the other side of the boys. Any other points you want to add? I said, well, I'd like a bit more variety. Yes, we can get more variety. That means more light and shade, forte and piano. So I said, yes, I'll just have a quick word with the organ scholar. I said to the organ scholar, we'll move the whole thing up half a tone. And nobody will know. We'll put it from F up into F sharp. We'll try it there. So we did that. It sounded exactly the same as it did the first time. And I said, now, in a moment I'm going to take a vote, you see, and we sang it through. And I said, how many thought that last one was the one they'd like to be broadcast around the world? And all the hands went up, and I saw Chef nodding to his neighbour. I thought, that's it. So Boris Hall didn't say anything then, but he said, the other said that was very good practice, because you involved everybody. That's what it's about. Boris Hall just stands out and tells people what to do, but you made us do it. You made us think about it, what was weak. You know, I didn't agree with what the boys said, but they had good suggestions made. They were very nice about it. Then I heard I'd got the organ scholarship, but I would start in October 1939.
You just a quick question. You said you sung in some very good choirs, Westminster Abbey and so on, but this was just something different.
Yes, I mean, we were good, and because when you haven't heard other choirs, you think that yours is the best. I was told Westminster Abbey as the best choir in the country. I believe people. You know, we had many people of different ages. We had one man of 16, one of 15, one of 30. You know, some were just starting on their first job, and others were old hands.
How would you rate King's Choir internationally in the time that you were in charge of it and subsequently?
I'd say it's the best of its kind. That is, if you have boys and men, which I prefer. I mean, some choirs have women and men, or even mixed choir, women, boys and men. But to have all the boys aged between 9 and 13, and all the men aged between, say, 18 and 21 or 19 and 22, you get a better focus because they're all...
So you'd say it was the best of that kind in the world?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure there have been good ones at Oxford as well, and other Cambridge colleges. I think that they've come up nearer now than they were in my day when I came up, because they've got many more specialists around. And King's and St John's had a good reputation always. They were slightly different. And Jesus were quite good because they didn't rely on boarders. They had only day boys from Cambridge. And I thought they reached a very good standard, although they went up to King's course, you had to go fetching people and all that.
What about choirs elsewhere? I mean, the Vienna Boys Choir, or in America?
Well,
or?
they're different. I mean, the Vienna Boys Choir are very much a performing choir. They sing these naval songs, a wider range. They're good in their way, and they're very well disciplined. When they come on, they walk in step, bow nicely. All that side is very well organised. And
But musically, there's nothing quite like it.
no, you could argue it's probably what Schubert knew when he was rehearsing them, because I mean, they sing in some German way, and you make allowances for where you are. I've been very often moved by people who haven't had the same degree of training, and some people feel King's is too precious, but it's always the same whatever they're doing. There's no variety. You never have them going, whoa, boom, boom. You wouldn't get any sort of drama of that sort. Whereas other cars, whoa! But nowadays, I mean, even that you get one or two anthems out there, hallelujah, you shout at the end, which my successors occasionally had. Of course, the old close bounds have gone now. You do something different. Yes. Well, we didn't realise there would be a war. I mean, some of us thought there would be a war sometime, but not necessarily now, because Hitler had already invaded Czechoslovakia and possessed it. And he made one or two sort of things that Germany needed a port, and they couldn't exist as a big nation without a good port. And they've been talking about invading somewhere to get a port. It was either going to be Danzig, in Poland, or else. They never hinted that it would be France and Belgium as well, but they hinted he wanted to enlarge Germany. We never thought of Russia on that day at all. That was a complete surprise to us. But we thought, when the announcement was made at the beginning of October 1939, I think the Prime Minister said, "I've got bad news, I've seen her Hitler," he called him all day, and he's been very difficult. He said that he's not going to withdraw from Czechoslovakia, and also that he has nothing against England at all at the moment, but if we want to make war, he's quite happy to engage in it. And he said if they ought to realise that we've got the Hindenburg line, which is impregnable, and they've got the Maginot line, which is impregnable. So it'll be a long time, but I don't think it'd pay anybody to go to war. And we just want everything resolved peacefully and quietly. And I mean that. You see, well, that wouldn't satisfy the British and the French. And the Prime Minister said, we in Britain and France are going to make war on Germany, because we made it clear that unless he withdrew from Czechoslovakia, a state of war would exist between us, because we cannot stand by and see a good country absorbed and taken over like that. So, he said, we are alone, we've got no friends at all, just Britain and France against Germany. Well, that was the first thing, and the first years of war were fairly quiet when we came up. I mean, we'd sent an army over immediately, the British army in Europe, and then they went over and occupied France, and they did well, and I think there were reconnaissance things, and of course our planes were busy, as were the Germans. But before Hitler could think of invading England, he had to have command of the air, and the big Battle of Britain made all the difference. I mean, our inferior air force in numbers was better than the Germans, and we shot down many more, and that was what deflected Hitler, I think, from invading immediately, because I think he might well have had a good victory, because his men were all armed pretty well, whereas we were very behind, and we had a small standing army which went to France. And we were very surprised when May came, May 1940, and the Germans invaded through Belgium and Holland into northern France, and our troops had to withdraw before that and eventually ask for an armament, and they withdrew from Dunkirk back to England. And then we were still on our own, but at least Hitler hadn't invaded us. We felt lucky, although we immediately got to work strengthening our coastal defences. And when I joined up later, it was in May 1940, we were sent immediately. I did my preliminary training in a place called Welwyn Garden City, which was supposed to be the long stop against London. If Hitler was going for London, we were going to counterattack. But then after a bit, we were sent on beach duty. We went to Harwich and Sandown, Shanklin, those sort of places. Harwich and Dovercourt was nearby, and we spent our time patrolling the beaches there, laying mines and everything.
In that year between school and Cambridge, what else did you do?
Well, I took part in various things in London. I first of all had an appointment at the Royal College of Music. I can put after my name that I studied at the Royal College of Music, so I went for 2 days a week. And the main thing was to see Malcolm Sargent conducting weekly orchestral rehearsals. And also I saw Constant Lambert conduct the second orchestra. They're both very different people, but I learned a lot from them. Sargent was the best conductor I've ever seen from the point of view of conveying what he wanted. Very clear with amateurs and professionals. They didn't all like him because they thought he was conceited, but I thought he was extremely good. And I found a great deal there. And I had counterpoint lessons from a man called R.O. Morris, who's written the textbook for everybody studying counterpoint. And I had piano lessons from a man called Frank Merrick, who was related to one of the staff at Clifton. And I had piano lessons. He was very good and took all the sort of scholars for that. So I felt that that side wasn't neglected during that year there. And I also did perform for Thorburn Ball, who was responsible for daily services on the BBC. And I suppose I did half a dozen of those, playing the organ one.
So you were quite busy in that year, but even busier when you came up to Cambridge, I
Oh,
suppose.
much busier, yes.
Um,
And I went to as many concerts as I could. During that year, I'd never heard works like Belshazzar's Feast of Walton, Hymn of Jesus, Host, and that opened my ears. That's something Morris Ord had said to me. You know, as you're coming up next year, you won't get a chance to hear those in Cambridge. Hear all the concerts you can.
Before we get on to the war again, you spent how long in Cambridge before you were drafted or recruited?
I spent 9 months. I came up in October and left in May. When I came up, I was interviewed by the music faculty, because I was obviously going to read music during that time. And I think the tutor said, you better go and talk to Dr. Middleton, who was then organist of Trinity College. And he said, you've got your FRCO, that makes it difficult for you to do part 1 music, because, you know, you've already done that. You know, we want to keep you occupied with something. He said, we've been talking amongst ourselves that we think you ought to do part 1 of the Must Be. So I said, that's fine. So he said, will you come along next week and we'll set you at work. And I didn't go to many lectures or anything, because they said, you know, I think you're ready for a lot of it. Said, I think you ought to do a little bit of composition, you know. So I wrote a bit of a string quintet just to show what I could do. So then along came Christmas tide, because they said they thought best if I took part 1 then. So I took it, I suppose, in early December, and I'm told I did well enough for them to meet afterwards, because I looked this up in the registry, university registry. I saw that they, in February, they decided I could take part 2 in May. So that was decided. And I saw both entries that he can embark on part 1. That's the only thing I've seen. So I started on part 2. They said this is to keep you occupied, and also if you did well, I mean, which would be stand against you, but if you do badly, you just forget and you can do it again when you come back. I mean, it won't count against you that you didn't come back, because nobody's ever taken part 2 in their second term. So see how you get on. So I did work and I enjoyed it. And I went to Hubert Middleton, but didn't learn anything, because I was supposed to be doing composition with him. I think I just went and I taught myself what little history there was by reading ordinary books. And I took it in May and was told that I'd got the mouse bead. So I rejoiced and thought, that's lovely. Remember, it's how I learnt. I didn't go and look at the boards outside the Senate House, whether it was the provost that told me, or whether it was John Raven, or whether it was the Dean of Studies, you know, but somebody told me that I'd passed. And then Provost Shepherd entered into it, saying this is very important because I don't think anybody's done this in 1 year. The other person who might have tried it with me was Henry Chadwick, because he was very musical and started on part 1, but then decided to go over to divinity halfway. And he stayed, I think, for 2 years or 3 years, whereas I went off after 1.
Well, tell me about, you mentioned Provost Shepherd. He's a legend in Kings. Tell me what sort of person he was.
Well, I loved him. He was sort of grumpy in his own way, and every time I saw him, he blessed me. Bless you, my boy. How have you been getting on? Kings is lovely, isn't it? I adore it. And I always used to, I enjoyed talking to him. And I heard stories about him in his lectures. He'd sit on the desk and just waggle his feet, saying, "Now we're going to talk about today." He hadn't prepared it. He was a very good lecturer, and everybody turned up to hear him. I never heard one of his lectures. Well, he said, "Well, I've got very good news for you. You've got part 2 of the Must Be, which means that you've technically passed all the exam, but there's a snag." So I said, "What's that?" So he said, "I'm afraid that the Vice-Chancellor is bound by regulations at Cambridge not to admit anybody to a degree who hasn't kept 9 terms. He said, if you turn up the statutes, you'll find it there." So I didn't bother to do that. He said, "What I can tell you is that will stand against your name for all time. And we have to sort out after the war. If you come through, which we hope you will, you'll come back and you will just decide what you do then. But he will be able to admit you once you've kept 9 terms here."
Even if you were dead, you...
Well, he said, "The one thing I can say, and this is that if you are dead and can't come back, you'll still have Bachelor of Music after your name. That will give you some comfort, otherwise it's a waste of your time having been here this year." He said, "That's most irregular. I don't know of anybody else on whom that's happened, but we haven't had death said anything." But he said, "I can promise you that." And so I went away quite happy. And I wasn't allowed to tell my best friends. None of them knew about it. I didn't tell my parents or my brothers or anything. So I knew when I came back in May 1945, or no, sorry, it was October 1945 afterwards, I knew what I had to do. I went to the professors, saw him, and he said, "Well, you better go to see the music faculty." And what I would like to do, they then had a new degree come in for people who've been serving in the war. I think it was probably less high standard. Said, "You've got a whole list of things you can do." I said, "What I'd like to do is a bit of history, particularly covering the first part of this century, because I've been in a war, and I could write about that, because I've just had 5 years of it. And presumably if you can set some questions about the war, I'll answer them like anybody else. And I'd also like a little bit of economics as well, because it's useful to have a bit. Can one do both?" And I said, "Yes, we can arrange that." So I did both things, and I sat the exam and passed it. I've never looked to see what grades I got in it. I didn't look them up. I think I did quite well. And Peter Godfrey was the other person. He's a New Zealander now, because he's been living there since. And he did the same course with me.
How long was that course?
It was 2 years.
2 years?
Yes. And slightly down because I didn't come back till November of 45, so I didn't get that first year. And I didn't really start work, I suppose, till the following January. And then I left. Yes, I held my 3rd year as usual. The last year, my 2nd year, was as usual. I went right up to...
There were some famous economists around in King's at that time. Were you taught by any of them?
No.
Caldor, or I suppose it was...
No, I didn't go to any of them. That's why I did economics, because I thought we were strong in that. I went to a chapter who taught about theory of rent. And this book, Alex Wood was an chap. I read his book through and went to one of his lectures.
let's
enunciated in his book. I thought it was better than watching him lecture.
let's go back to the war, because
Yes.
you'd just been enlisted and you were protecting London from and
Yes.
doing things on
To
the
start with,
beaches.
yes,
Yes.
that's right. Then we went to the beaches, and we went to several places between 1940, when I joined up in May, and say June of 1944, when we went across to France. During those years, we went not only to Harwich and Dovercourt, but Sandown and Shanklin and the Isle of Wight, and up to Scotland. We were going to go, we did assault training up on Loch Fyne, where we got off boats and ran up those steep mountains carrying things, because we were going to invade the Azores, which was then Portuguese, but the Portuguese were letting the Germans refuel their submarines there. And Churchill said, we cannot let that happen, even though they're neutral, we're going to attack them. We, we're in the war anyway, so we were prepared for that. And we spent a fortnight up there running up and down. Very good training, I thought, how to land and what to do. And just as we came down south and went down to the south, and were about to embark when Churchill let it be known we needn't go, because he bought them, bought the right to go. And we used the Azores from that time on. I don't know whether he told them they were going to be invaded or not, but it was certainly a relief for us. I think we'd won quite easily because they didn't have many troops marshalled ready. They gave us maps, we didn't know where it was, just they had names. But John Dennison, who was then my brigade major, and he was influential right through my life. He was a good friend of mine. He was a horn player in one of the big orchestras. Then he became in charge of the British Council Music and the Arts Council Music. And he was in charge of the whole of the South Bank. South Bank, the Festival Hall and all those halls. So whenever I needed a hall, I rang him up and said, we must have a hall. Do a bar choir concert. He was very good. He only died last year, aged 91 or 2. So that, and then we came down south and we landed somewhere near Exbury, which is near Southampton. So that confirmed the rumours which were going about that we were going to go to Normandy. We didn't actually sail till June the 6th was D-Day. I think we went about the 20th, by which time the beaches had all been cleared by our people, and we just went through them. I mean, the beaches were just lines with cotton wool to show where you could go, because all the rest of the beach was mined, very dangerous. And we had to keep to main roads everywhere. Of course, everything had been mined in the sides. And it was very strange for us, because we could hear the battle going on all night, even though we were sleeping well back. And the first night we were heavily shelled. We were in a wood, because they insisted on us being in a wood. That's what drew the fire, because all their guns were trained on all the woods. But on the other hand, if you were out in the open, it was hopeless by day. So we used to go into the woods to sleep. And we were shelled quite a lot, and lost a few people, not very many. Well, then after our big moment came, about July the 7th, when we had to attack Caen, C-A-E-N, which was pivotal. Everybody wanted it. The Germans wanted it. Ron said, whoever owns Caen owns Normandy, because it's the basic thing. So the gunners, the Canadians, were operating on our north of us, going from west to east towards Caen. And we went down to the south and occupied a little village called Cheux, C-H-E-U-X. And by very good fortune, we'd been having terrible casualties from German tanks. We captured 5 of them. I think 2 went astray and got there and went into a ditch and couldn't move their things. And 3 others came to rescue them. And our men, just with the bazookas in those things that you can attack a tank with, managed to capture 5. When it got back to divisional headquarters, the Duke of Cornwall's light infantry soldiers with their guns, who had captured 5 tanks. Said if everybody did that, the war would be over. We got a terrific reputation of being an attacking battalion. And we were then chosen to go to attack Hill 112, which was a very big important ridge running from about a mile high sea in every direction up towards the coast or the other way south, and everybody who had it wanted it. And the Germans had repulsed one poor attack by British, and we were sent in to take the thing. I forgot to say, on our very first day, my first commanding officer was killed. He saw a man with a machine gun, one of our chaps, killed in action. And they said, "Go, we can't leave it like that, get him out of the way." And he got down and started firing it, and they fired back immediately. That was my first taste of action, seeing it. I'd never seen a dead body in my life until I got there, because one saw a lot of dead bodies, and a lot of dead cows as well. Everywhere was death, wherever you looked. And 0112 is in all the histories of being one of the great battles. It was our worst. We had, I think, 300 casualties out of 700 men. And my task was an important one, in that I had to keep touch with everybody, so the commanding officer knew where we were and where the enemy was. So we had A company, B company, C company, D company, and the support company with machine guns, and we had tanks under command as well. I had to know exactly where they were, how many casualties they had, who was at risk, and tell him what was happening. So we had 2 terrible nights where the people in this little wood on the top were surrounded, being mown down, and so were the Germans as well, because we were both firing. And my second commanding officer got killed on Hill 112, because we were firing guns over the top of the ridge, and he couldn't see where they were landing. He said, I need to climb a tree, I get a better view there. And I heard somebody say to him, "You'll be killed if you go up there." He didn't take any notice. He was a very brave man. He was a solicitor. He climbed up this tree and got a very good view, and he was shot down from there. Of course, he was in range of them, and he fell down. That was an awful thing. And then our company commanders, we lost them all that night. That's 4, sort of senior chaps. They were all majors. And for one night, the adjutant, who was a chap called Bill Gorman, and I, as intelligence officer, were really in command of the 300 or 400 who were left. And we took command, did our best, And he stayed at battalion headquarters, and I went round trying to find everybody. And I said, "We can't leave this place, because if we leave it, the Germans will come right down to the coast, which the whole lot will be cut off." So I said, "Our orders are to hold this hill." So I said, "You've got to go back." And they went back under terrible, I was going to say provocation. And I just said, it's all of us, because we let them through. And people who've been without food or anything went back and manned the place. And I can show you histories of it written in the thing. And I was very lucky. I didn't hear about it till afterwards. But we held out, and I got messages back to brigade headquarters, which was my brigade. I said, "We must be relieved, otherwise we can't hold it for more than a day or so, because the Germans seem to have got more." So they did send reinforcements next day, and we pulled up behind them. And several of my good friends were pulled out that night, I lost them. And we then were taken out of the line. We were able to shave and have a bath and good food. And then from there on it was like any other battalion, until Arnhem came in September. That was our next big thing. And by that time we'd managed to fill the vacancies. Of course, we didn't fill them all from our battalion, because many of them were too young to be in command of the company. We borrowed from the Worcesters and other things who came in. So we started the second month. There was a number of different people. They settled in very well. And we had a nice man called George Taylor, who got his DSO and a bar as well. One for what he'd done. No, he didn't get for the Hill 112, because he came in after it was all over. But immediately afterwards, we went to rescue the Arnhem, which I'll tell you, that was the next thing, which happened in September. Monty had this great plan that he was going to drop all his paratroops and airborne people in this one place, Arnhem, which was 5 bridges back, because we got up to the edge of Holland, who was still neutral, and we were told we've got to go through to link up with our airborne forces. and it was one road, and our task was to follow the Grenadier Guards, who were very good, our top regiment, who were going with all their guns blazing. And what we didn't realise was, at the time, I realised, that there were Germans both sides of us in Holland. There were a lot of Germans who were west of us, trying to get back to Germany because they thought it was another attack by us and they were going back through us. And there were others facing us head on. Well, we got off the first bridge, second, third, fourth were all taken by American paratroops, and then their job was out of it. Because originally, Montgomery had planned for us to take those first bridges and put the Americans to take the final one. No, he reversed it because the Americans didn't want to be the last one. So he reversed it, made the Americans take the first four. They got the first casualties, of course, and then we went right through them. And we were fired on by both sides, and we went along this single line, and when we got to Nijmegen, we couldn't go up the main road from Nijmegen to Arnhem because it was absolutely blocked. And the Grenadiers say they were losing a lot of people pushing up. They said, you cannot do that. And I met the brigade commander and the battalion commander said, get in touch with the guards, you know them well. So I went up and talked to a chap called Major Carrington. I didn't know who he was in those days. And only 3 weeks ago, I went and talked to him down in Salisbury. Because I was at the thing down there, they were having the 700th anniversary of the founding of Salisbury Cathedral. I saw my wife talking to a chap who looked vaguely like Lord Carrington. I wasn't sure. I'd only seen him on the telly occasionally years ago. I said to one of the girls, is that Lord Carrington? He said, well, he is. I said, he probably is. So I went up to him and said, are you Lord Carrington? He said, yes, I am. I said, well, I last met you on Nijmegen Bridge in 1944, when you told me, don't go up that road. But if we had gone up, we'd have been slaughtered. Because he said we could not make any progress at all. All I said to him is, you can't go through us. I know your orders are to go to Arnhem to get those people out. You can't do it through us. And I absolutely refused. So I said I had to tell my battalion commander and brigade commander, and divisional commander, so they know what the orders are. So he said, well, good luck to you. Very nice, very courteous and nice. I never thought about it till this day, you know. And then, so we've been in correspondence. I've sent him a copy of the book. But it doesn't mention him, of course. I didn't know, but I remember this person. And what I said to our brigade, the only thing we can do is to go west and go up through, there's no roads there, but we've got our tanks and Bren gun carriers where we can go. And we went 8 miles west, and then right up to the river, and we landed 8 miles west of Arnhem, by which time our troops, airborne troops, had been driven back out of Arnhem and were seeking refuge to the west of their only way out. So we made contact with them, and we said, we can't help you, we can't get across the river, we haven't got any boats, but we've got a lot of ammunition, we can fire into the enemy if we know where they are. They said, well, they're everywhere. I said, I don't think we can last more than another day. So I said, well, I'll see what I can do. He said, he really is desperate. So I said, well, I have to report it to our divisional commander and possibly to General Horrocks. And General Horrocks came up that day and saw my commanding officer, said, why aren't you doing what you're told? He said, I've had, from the guards, they said they cannot move. They're having heavy casualties, so we came and did this. It's very good to have come up to the river. We shall remember that. But what are we going to do about the airborne? So my commanding officer said that they all say they've got to come out. So he said then, Horrocks said, I've served under Monty in Africa, but he would never let anybody withdraw without having seen the position. Where can I see the battle? I said, there's only one place, but it's dangerous. There's that church tower in Driel. It's about, I suppose, 80 feet high. It's just like this. I said, I've been up and I've looked at it. I said, I don't think it will last long there, because it's the one place that's marked on every map within miles. So he said, I'm going to risk it. I'm not going to call them out for that there. So he came up the tower with me and my brigade commander and a divisional commander. So if anything had landed there, they would have a terrific loss. I felt guilty in a way for letting them go. They came up and he said, this is enough, they can't put up with that noise. So they're coming out tonight through your battalion. So tell everyone to stand to from after 1 o'clock with full gear ready to receive them. Have every boat within miles, even if you haven't got any boats. Have to have a hot meal for them there, and then we'll send them straight back to Nijmegen for a proper meal. So my quartermaster managed to get, we had quite a lot of stores of things like hot chocolate and stuff and all that. So we got out a good thing for them. They came back through us, very grateful. I've met some of them since, and they came back, most of them unshaven for 3 days, 4 days. Some of them almost starving because they'd been short of food. They'd been driven out of their original thing. And Colonel Frost, who held the bridge for a time, was amongst them. And it was my worst moment, and I really thought, well, that's the end of our attack. Of course, Monty said the war will be over by Christmas if we get on him. Of course, he said, if we get on him, I'm going to push infantry battalion up to a place called Apeldoorn, which is about 50 miles north. Then I've got a wide choice. I can either turn westwards and put out all those things which are bombing London every night, those night things, or I could turn right and come down the east bank of the Rhine and get straight onto them. They won't be expecting us. I said, I'm not going to say what I'm going to do. I've never discovered, I'd have to have asked him, because they were both very important. I mean, England would have loved it if we could have wiped out the people who were bombing us every night. It would have been quicker end of the war, gone right down into the Ruhr Valley, and it would have aided our crossing the Rhine, because we still had to cross the Rhine. So that was that little thing. Well, then everything was pretty quiet. It was a very wild winter until it was Christmas Day, I think, when the Germans attacked in the Ardennes, and we didn't tell the Americans this, although they found out. We were sent down to be a long stop, because everybody thought they'd push through the Ardennes there, because they had their own divisions, they were guarding that part. But we went down there, and the Americans were great. The Americans held the fort, and we weren't required, so we went down and had a good time there. Well, then along came winter, and we realised we were going to be part of the invasion of Germany properly, and we went over in May, I think. No, April. And we had proper bridges. We had people doing these scaffolding things which you put across, which took our tanks across, and we made our way across and got as far as Bremen, and we were hoping to get to Berlin before the Russians, because they were attacking from the east, we were attacking from the west. Messages came all the way down from Churchill saying, you must get to Berlin before the Russians, because if they get there first, it'll be the end of us. And of course the Russians did get there first, and we just had to accept defeat. And my first meeting with the Russians was a place called, on the River Elbe, E-L-B-E, at a place called Dannenberg, where they were just opposite us, across the river. I think we let 3 days pass. Then my commanding officer said, everything's quiet now, there's been a ceasefire, and no Germans are firing, nor are we. He said, send somebody over to address the senior Russian. So I said, we've got nobody in our unit who speaks Russian at all. He said, we'll get somebody just to go, and they'll come over, they'll realise and we mean a meal. So we just had, I think, 8 Russian officers to come over to mix with our battalion. And we'd had a wonderful war, because every place we captured lovely sets of china in these houses, which were occupied. We just helped ourselves. There were lovely sets of things, silver candlesticks and lovely nice fire, and we thought we showed them how we live. So they came over, these people. None of them spoke English, and we didn't speak any Russian between us. But we bowed to each other, sort of thing. And then we started with sherry for everybody. Then we started with an hors d'oeuvre, which our cooks had sort of fixed. A bit of ham, and a bit of cheese, a bit of this, and a big plate. And to our horror, the guest of honour sat on the commanding officer's left, and we went round that way. He helped himself to all the ham, because we were going alternately British out. So the next British officer helped himself to all the cheese. So we didn't like to show them up. Nobody dared do that. So it was the last chap who got all the onion. So that was that. And we talked and bowed and things. And my commanding officer said, well, he moved the set, and had a battle between the salt cellar and the thing, saying, boom, boom, boom. We had a good time, and they departed soon. And they said, just before we go, we'll have the national anthems of both countries. I said, okay. So I played our British national anthem first. And then I tried the Russian. I thought I knew the Russian one, but there were two. I didn't realise that. There was the one before the reform. I played the wrong one. I didn't know the new one at all. But they all laughed and patted me on the back. They said, no, 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 no. So that was my first mistake. So
I was wondering, I mean, that's a point where I could just ask about music, because was there any musical relief during your time in the army? Did you?
Only jazz I played. But I did do a concert, funnily enough, as soon as we got into Germany. We thought we'd make friends, because we had strict rules about talking to Germans, because they didn't want our officers getting to know German women too well. So we were told not to talk to them unless as soon as somebody else was there and all that. But we did have one concert where they said they'd got a lovely soprano, so I got the programme of that. I played all the pieces I learned at school, which I knew by heart. Jardin, Ravel, the proper concert. I've got the programme on it, with Senior So-and-so and Captain David Willcocks, playing. And that went down well. Well, then all sorts of other things happened. When they had the Second Army Thanksgiving service in Celle, C-E-L-L-E, I was asked to play the organ for that, which was not a big occasion. I mean, they didn't have everybody, but they had representatives of lots of battalions.
What was your, I mean, looking at it more widely, I mean, you knew that almost all the greatest musicians in history were German or Austrian. I mean, did you feel any feeling of oddness fighting against people who had produced Bach and
Mozart? No, I mean, we've taught that all Germans, whether they were fighting or not, were against us. So they were potential enemies. Until the ceasefire taking place, well then one adopted a thing, one was very nice to the people, because some of the girls, if we gave them cigarettes or cheese, they'd give us, whatever delicacies there were. We soon made friends, but I didn't talk music at all. There was nobody in my battalion I could talk music to. So there was nobody like John Dennison, who was at brigade headquarters. I mean, if I mentioned tuba or trombone, they wouldn't have known what I was talking about. They were ordinary men. And by that stage, they only about a third were genuine Cornishmen. They tried, but impossible to fill.
What regiment was it?
Duke of Cornwall.
Duke of Cornwall.
That was my Cornish regiment, which I asked for. When I got through my training, I was asked what battalion I'd like to go to. I said, well, I'm not sure if there are any vacancies. And I was told, yes, there is. I asked for the Duke of Cornwall. Then I was told to report to Welling Garden City, to a battalion.
So we've got towards the end of the war. Did you get as far as Berlin or not?
No, we stayed, as far as I was concerned, just in Dandenberg. Then we went counterattacked a little bit afterwards. We went to Off-Rusden. That may have been just a little bit before the end of the war. After that, yes, we had a lot of games and swimming competitions. But then I was going to, I didn't write to Cambridge, but I let it be known that I was coming back very soon after May the 5th, when we finished with the Germans. I think I wrote to the provost, said things are going well and the war's now over. I'll be back with you soon or something. It never occurred to me I might have to go out to Japan. Everything came round and everybody, the war with Germany is over. Everyone's got to realise there's still another war going on in Japan. And most of it will be needed there because we need troops badly. So all my colleagues, and I think 3 or 4 volunteered to go anyway because they wanted promotion staying with them. I didn't want to go, even though I had my brother, the second brother, who's another one who's now 94. He was a prisoner of the Japs, taken in 1942, and he was held. My mother never knew he was a prisoner.
Singapore, is it? Or?
No, he was taken in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
He was in on duty. He was in charge of all the guns in Hong Kong, but they were facing the wrong way. They were facing out to sea, and they found terrible difficulty in getting them round to face the land. It never occurred to them that they were going to be attacked by land. And it was an awful muddle, and they got in, and he could talk to you about that in 10 minutes, They tried to humiliate the officers. They made them all eat with the men, and some people suffered indignities, And but he was fairly well treated because half his group had to go to the Burma Road.
Mm.
You know, a lot of them got torpedoed. They did that by ballot. He was lucky he didn't have to go.
Did you go to the Japanese War or not?
No.
You didn't?
No, I didn't. I was excused. It was because it was over. It was in September. They dropped the atom bomb and the Japanese came in like that. And within 2 days there was no firing at all. I mean, we were absolutely at war with them. And people hated the Japs for it. And my brother has come round to it. We had the Japanese Day soon after the war when we all assembled in London. I had to conduct something in aid of, and he didn't mind me doing that at all. He went up there, and he went on the air to say that he's all very well blaming the Japanese. They were only doing what they were told to do. And he was trying to defend them, and we should have done the same. They stood up for their country, and afterwards, you know, they were grovelling. They realised something's wrong. But when he came back came back via America, because all people who had been captors there were fed in America gradually, because they'd had nothing but rice. And their tummies were all over the shop, and they were fed up and made to do walking and all that sort of thing. And he came back 3 months later after the armistice. But,
so your war had ended, and
yes.
you had written to still Provost Shepherd, was it, who was still
Yes.
to say, I'm coming back.
That's it.
And it was slightly delayed, but then you arrived back.
I arrived back in November, actually, because they kept me on till October, the middle of October, because I mean I was still with my unit, and some had already gone out to Japan, but most of them were still with the unit.
Was it odd coming back to after that terrible experience, coming back to a kind
No,
of...
I mean I was surprised that Cambridge had not changed at all. I mean, everything looked the same. I mean, the chapel looked the same, the traffic in the middle was the same, and everybody seemed to be civilian, you know, and it just seemed all right. So I settled in all right, and I came back. Boris Hall came back at the same time. It's a coincidence, because he was in the Air Force, having served in the First World War in the Air Force. So he came back and we talked, and he said, I'll take the practice today. And you know, he shared it just as it was before. And I felt quite different this time. I was not frightened of him my first year. Frightened, I mean, I was apprehensive I might say the wrong thing, you know, and upset him. This time I felt we were colleagues. I was a major and he was a squadron something. We all called him Boris anyway, you know. There was no sort of feeling. And he was very nice with the choir. And they some of them liked Harold Dark very much because he was easygoing. And we both came back in November, and it was agreed that Harold Dark should continue to be in charge of the choir until after Christmas. So Boris had 3 weeks or a month listening to Dark. We'll get it right through Christmas. So they were singing tune. And I played for the Advent Carol service that time, was my duty, and Boris Hall played for the Christmas service, because with Dark conducting down below. So it was all a very nice thing.
They hadn't started the broadcasting by then.
They never stopped it. They broadcast
right through the war?
Yes. They said it came from a college chapel. They didn't say which one. The whole of England knew where it was. But ever since 1928, the service has been broadcast live from the service.
Well, what about the windows?
They were taken out, I didn't see it, but they were removed and taken to Welsh Mountain and dug into the side for safety. But we didn't see the windows come back till, I suppose, the following March or April. They put them back gradually.
It's reputed that the person centrally involved was John Saltmarsh.
Yeah, I think so.
Did you know
everything about? I love John Saltmarsh.
Yes, tell me about John.
Oh, he's a lovely man. My wife used to go. She got to know the college bit because I got engaged to her in 1947, and she came on one of John Saltmarsh's tours.
Oh yes.
They started by being about 20 minutes long. Then they went to 25 minutes, and they went to 30 minutes, then 45.
They were around Cambridge, were they? Or?
No, just the chapel.
Just the chapel?
Just the chapel. She just went to the chapel once. She was fascinated. And each time they got longer by about 10 minutes, you know. And he knew everything about the measurements, you know, here and this way, and all the pictures, you know, and the windows, which were Old Testament, which were New Testament, and if you stopped a bit, that's describing this and that. I've often wished I had time to look at them all, because they're so difficult unless you've had that book, wonderful book to look
Waymond,
at.
yes.
And he was very nice, he was very kind to me, and my very first carol service that I played for in 1945, the Advent carol service, I'd only been back 3 weeks, I just found I played as though nothing had happened. I didn't have to practice, you know. Once you've done it.
Extraordinary, isn't it?
Yes, and the piano as well. You see, this when I gave this recital, I played all the pieces I'd learned at school, you know, difficult pieces, and I didn't think about it, of course it's there. And with, I think...
Was the choir in a good state when you came back?
Not too bad, I mean, much better than I thought, because there are people of different generations there, and some had got out early a bit, but it didn't start to rectify itself until Boris said we'll start our chorus, Colour Flowers in advance, and it sorted out within 2 years. They were all young, but one of the people in the audience was Herbert Howells,
Oh, yes.
who I'd always admired immensely when I was a little chorister. He by then was, I suppose, 60, well no, or 50 anyway, and I was delighted to go up to him, and he was very congratulated about my playing. He said, when did you last play? I said, 5 years ago. And I played one of his pieces, he was very pleased, and I didn't think that, I didn't know, but 5 years later I was going to be director of the Royal College of Music in London. He was on my staff, he was a senior professor. This little boy, age 9, thinking that's Herbert Howells, then age 29 as I was then, that's Herbert Howells, then suddenly finding him in the front row with Ernest Bullock. He was the other one who'd been so kind to me, sitting in the front row. I couldn't sort of say much. I just said I'm very grateful to 2 gentlemen sitting in the front row for all they offered me. Some of them, or one of them, was from 1929 to 34, and the other one was from 34 to 38. You know, I've had to work them both in there.
Oh, lovely. But you came back, you did your course in economics and history.
Yes.
History of music, presumably, was it? Or history, just generally?
Well, just supposed to be history.
Oh, right. So John may have taught you. Who?
No, I'm trying to think who I went to. We went to Jack Plum.
Oh, really?
I went with Peter Godfrey.
Gosh.
Jack Plum.
What was Jack Plum like? He was a young man then, wasn't he? Fairly young, anyway, because I knew him later.
45, I suppose. He's very nice. You know, just
Had quite a reputation.
Then came my big moment. You won't believe this. This is absolutely true. He said, have you done any writing? I said, none at all. He said, well, you've got to get delved in. I'd like you to write about Cecil Rhodes. I said, I don't know anything about it. Well, find something out about him and bring me a nice essay. Just, well, 5, 6 pages, something to do, just outlining his life. So I thought I'd do that. So I quickly went to the library, and the first thing I found was the Children's Encyclopedia. So I took it up and it said, Cecil Rhodes came of yeoman stock, he was born in so-and-so, and I wrote it out, you see. And I had to go back with Peter Godfrey, and he said he was going to read the thing first. So I said, I don't mind. So he said, all right, you do it, Willcocks. So I started off, Cecil Rhodes came of yeoman stock, he was born in, and Peter Godfrey looked at me, he said, you didn't go to that book, did you? We both written the same essay. Yeah, so that ended us with Jack Plum. He was very nice after that. But you'd have done the same.
Yes.
I didn't know anything about him.
I used the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Well, that's a good one. That was too big. So.
Yes.
But it was very good as law school. I thought just what he wanted.
Plagiarism is not a new problem in academic life. Was there anyone else in those 2 years when you were still an undergraduate who you became particularly close to?
Not really. I didn't go to any lectures. I mean, I just read the books, you know. And with acoustics, I just read the books. It's all beautifully laid out there with all the diagrams when you speak. And what did tell me that if you have 2 different instruments playing the same note, you get silence. If the way of doing that, I just didn't believe that, you know. You know, if you have a flute playing here and a clarinet playing here, you hear twice as loud, but apparently the things beat against each other. I learned a lot of that sort of, it didn't make any difference to me. And I just enjoyed it. Then I learnt about organ bellows and how they work. And,
When you came to the end of that undergraduate course,
Yes.
were you sure what you wanted to do then, or how did you decide?
No, I got, after those 2 years, it was in 1947, yes, 1947 July, I've been to think, and I thought the college just gave me a fellowship, which was going to provide me with 4 years of money to enable me to do research.
It was a research fellowship?
Yes.
Mm.
Well, they called it just a fellowship. They didn't say research. But they said you can use it for research or something. What most people do, and they get a doctorate. So I thought that sounded interesting. So I wrote to Watkins Shaw, who was an authority. He'd just done a very good edition of Messiah, which everybody was using. And I knew he'd started work on John Blow, who was one of the organists of Western Australia. So I thought, if you want some help with that, I could certainly do it. So I got in touch with him. I said, will you give me some help and advice over this, because I've got to write a fellowship dissertation, and I'd like to examine John Blow, because he was an organist twice in Western Australia. First time he was organist, then along came Purcell, and he made way for the very gifted Purcell, and who took his place. Purcell died, so John Blow went back again to resume his post, which had been interrupted by Purcell. I said there must be a very good story there for somebody who's prepared to edit his work. And I think I could do it. So he said, yes, do. He said, I suggest you go to the library and read about him and then come and see me. We can make up our mind. Next morning, I found a letter from Salisbury saying, would I be organist of Salisbury Cathedral? I couldn't believe it. It's one of the leading cathedrals. And I didn't even know who was organist. Well, the organist was Sir Walter Alcock, aged 85, who was the finest organist in Britain. He played for 3 coronation services, Edward VII, George V, and George VI. I mean, he was assistant at the Abbey for the first one, and also for the second he was called back. And for the third one, they said, well, Alcock's played for the other 2, let's have him again, he's the best organist. So he went back for the 3rd time. And then he retired to Salisbury and spent his last 30 years as organist of Salisbury Cathedral. And he was then aged 85, and he gave him a wonderful recital for television on his 85th birthday, or radio it was, I think, on his 85th birthday. And I went down 2 or 3 days after, and he had been told they were making approaches to somebody, he didn't know who. And I got down there and met the Bishop of Sherborne and the precentor, who said, I'm the only person here who knows you've been asked. So I thought that's peculiar with the dean and chapter, because there was a dean and 4 canons who were chapter, and the bishop. I didn't know any of those. So he said, well, you're responsible to me, now I'm responsible to the chapter. Will you take it on? So I said, well, I must consult Boris Hall, because I'm really still a Kingsman and I'm doing research. So let's go and have a look at the organ. There's a beautiful organ down there. So I went and looked. And I was then taken round by the wife of the presenter. She said, I'll take you round Salisbury Close. You'll find what a wonderful place it is. Said, we'll start by tomorrow morning. We met at 9:30. We started out. He said, have you met the old meddler? So I said, I haven't met him. I thought she was referring to the dean, because we were walking towards the deanery. She said, no, I was talking about the medlar tree there. Well, that was my first mistake. We were first for 5 minutes there. So anyway, they persuaded me. This is a lovely house there. There's a picture in my book of a lovely house. It's been occupied by the organist for 600 years. The boys used to come every day for their rehearsals there. And it was a lovely situation. And I decided to accept. One of the things I said, you realise we're not going to turn Lady Alcock out if he dies, because she's been there for a long time. It's a beautiful house, but she'll probably leave sometime during the first year. Would you be happy to look after yourself if we find a hotel for him? I said, yes, that's all right. So I said, I am actually engaged to be married. So they said, oh, good. When you married? I said, not till November, because my wife's a school teacher, and she feels she ought to go to half term in a Cambridge school. So she did that, and we were married on the 8th of November, 3 days before the Queen was married in Westminster Abbey. Nice little thing. And so they took me round, and I thought this is lovely, and I came back and told Rachel, my wife, and told Boris. He said, this is a chance of a million. No people nowadays get elected to a place of such seniority at the age of 27. Said, Francis Jackson has just been appointed organist of York Minster. He's 29. That's broken the ice. And Gerald Knight has been appointed organist of Canterbury. He's 29 as well. He'll be the third in the list. All young people. Because all these people who've been longing to get Alcock's job when he retired at 65 or 70 or 75 or 80 or 85, thought they'd be getting it, they'd be running. And all these assistants of people were very upset, I think, when all these 3 jobs went to young people who were relatively unknown. So I think afterwards it was Eric Milner White, because the presenter had come from York, where he'd been presenter up there, and he knew, and Milner White had spoken about me, because he was dean when I got my first degree.
He was Dean of King's.
King's.
And he started the carol,
Yes,
revived carol
that's
services.
it, in 1918.
What sort of man was he?
Quiet,
Quiet,
nice.
nice.
You know, otherworldly, but very nice. I mean, you wouldn't go up and slap him on the back or anything, but he's very polite, nice, you know. I liked him very much. And I didn't know him well, but he of course congratulated me after the service in 1939. He said, this is wonderful. And then when I came back after the war, it was a different regime. I've forgotten who was dean.
You mentioned Michael Till, but that was later.
He was much later.
Much later, yes.
And Alec Vidder was later.
Yes.
They were all later. And then the chap who's at Oxford now,
Head of Christchurch.
yes,
Yes.
that's right. He was the third one.
Yeah. Tell me about Salisbury.
Salisbury, they said, well, what we're going to do, we thought of the hotel seemed very wrong. You're going to stay with the Bishop of Sherborne for the next month, you know, almost until for a bit. And that was Bishop Key, who later became Bishop of Truro. Very nice man, good musician. And he sang in the Choral Society, which I conducted down there, and his wife was very nice. And they were very nice. And I settled into Salisbury well, and I gradually did more. And they put me in a little cottage, which had sort of 2 bedrooms. And they thought this is going to be marvellous for Lady Alcock when she moves out, you know, soon. But she actually moved out the following May. So I was in that little place with my wife Rachel, when after we got married, from November up to May. And a lovely summer's day. We got 2 vans. We came across them close. One going from number 5 to number 47, number 475, and all our luggage things. And our first car didn't have a roof. It had one of those things that was strapped over the top. There's an old full-nose Morris, you know. So I had 3 years there. And they were like any other cathedral. I mean, we had the daily rehearsals with the boys, and I took them in, you know, every time before practice. And I got around the diocese a bit. I went to visit the churches, did things. My big moment was there was a poor dean called Robbins, who lived to be 106. He was very shaky. You know, and I used to look over the top of the organ. I'd see he always used to spend getting coins into one hand, and I was got things up. It seemed sorting out during the lessons. I could look down on him. Well, one day he said to me, Mr. Willcocks, I want Easter Day to be marvellous. We've had Walter Alcock here. He was marvellous as an organist, but he couldn't cover up the choir. The choir is so dull, so dull. I want people to come out of that service really refreshed. I said, I'll see Mr. Dean, they really sing well. So I called the choir to come into the choir stalls for a special practice on the Saturday before Easter Sunday. And we were busy doing Hallelujah. I said, oh, more life, Hallelujah, more age, Hallelujah. I said, I want everybody to come up feeling refreshed. So they said, we'll enter into this. And I was just about to finish, I had about 10 minutes more left, and the furniture came and tapped me on the shoulder. The Dean wants to see you down in the nave. So I went down to see the Dean. I said, hello, Mr. Dean. He said, did I hear Hallelujah being sung? So I said, yes, we're practicing for tomorrow morning. I want to do a big service. So he said, you must never, never sing Hallelujah during Lent in Aachen Cathedral. It's just not done. I said, I'm terribly sorry, we're only rehearsing for tomorrow. And I know the men well and the boys, they were all trying. You must not do it again. He said, carry on with your rehearsal, but you must not sing Hallelujah. I'd rather it went to good service. So I went back to the choir. I said, this time, whenever the word Hallelujah comes, you sing fa-la-la-la, fa-la-la-la, fa-la-la-la. We went through like that. Of course, I made my day with them. They thought, this is the man we want. I went back to the dean after the morning service. It was the best service we've ever had since you've been here. You know. So I felt, and I made great friends with him. We had our little differences. I've told one big story about the organ tuner. We said that the organ needed tuning. Well, why? Because they've been in charge of this organ. They ought to have told me before. They said it hasn't been tuned for 25 years. So I said, I looked it up, and it was actually 22 years. But it's a normal thing. I said, you'd better ask him to come down to see me. So I arranged for Mr. Willis, who was the head of this firm, who had been responsible for Truro Cathedral, Salisbury Cathedral, all the big ones where there's Willis organ. I said, will you come down to be interviewed? He said, certainly. So he came down, after spent my own, and he said, the dean sat at the end, and Mr. Willis on his right, and I was on his left. He said, now, Mr. Willis, what's all this about the organ needing tuning? And I saw Mr. Willis take a little pill out and take it. And he said, Mr. Dean, has your room been cleaned in the last 25 years? He said, I'm not going to be interviewed by you. It's nothing to do with you. He said, I have a lady who comes in. There's nothing to do with the organ. This is a £25,000 job. He said, my cleaner doesn't get that. He said, now you will listen to what I've got to say. And Mr. Willis did reduce the bill by about 2,000. But you know, it was one of those things, he couldn't stand being interviewed. It was rude of Mr. Willis. He couldn't resist it. He looked round the room. Of course, there was no answer to that one, minus the ordinary tune.
Lovely. So, 3 lovely
3
years.
And during those 3 years, I was very lucky in that the conductor of the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra was a man called Rudolf Schwarz, who was a very good conductor out of one of the war camps where he was a Jew and had been poisoned or something. And he was a very good conductor. But towards the end of his time, he was being sought for other jobs, bigger, better than Bournemouth. And Birmingham were interested in appointing him City of Birmingham organist. So he said, I should be away, I think, 2 or 3 times this term, you know, on certain days. Would you be able to take a concert for me in Bournemouth? I said, well, I haven't any experience of conducting major symphony orchestras like this, but I'll have a go. So he said, yes, do. I'd seen Sargent conduct when I was at the college in Constant Lambert. So I went down and did concerts. I chose my program. So like Mozart number 40, those sort of ones which I knew inside out, and other things. But then he got fine our programs, excellent. I'll back them in. So I went down and did these 3 concerts. They got very good reviews, saying Willcocks ought to be here the whole time. He didn't have an assistant. So he had to do all the concerts himself. So I got sort of nibbles from them that I ought to go in. So then along came Adrian Bolt, who had been a friend of mine. I think he knew somebody. He knew particularly the person who was in charge of the Times Literary Supplement, a man called Sir Bruce Richmond, who used to come to a lot of the services at Salisbury and our concerts, and was very pleased with what I did. He was a great friend of Adrian Bolt. And he said, I think he's due to have a better job than this, because he doesn't see any good musicians down there. He's got his own choir, and he's got the Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, which is a great help. But I think that Rudolf Schwarz is leaving, probably, so I don't know if that will last. So Bolt wrote to me and said, there's a vacancy at Worcester. There's a man called Ivor Atkins, who's 83 now. So I said, oh, I'm used to doing it. I took over from 85. 83 should be it. He said, what I want you to think about is moving to Worcester. They haven't advertised it. None of these jobs, I didn't get, at Salisbury wasn't advertised at all, nor was Worcester. So this is being filmed privately. I've been asked to advise them. Said if I can say that I know a really good organist who can also conduct, and Rudolf Schwarz has said that you do very well with the little orchestra. So I said, well, I'll certainly go and see them. And the father of David Briggs, whom you know, who was an old chorister here, was a canon of Worcester, so I didn't know one person in Worcester. I didn't know anybody else, the dean or the canons or the headmaster or anything. And I went down there, and Mr. Briggs, David Briggs' father, said, would you take over? Because Atkins has done marvellous work in his time. He's been here over 50 years, and we want to get rid of him. If we can say we've got the organist of Salisbury coming, I think he'll look differently at it, because he doesn't want to leave. So I said, very well. When do you want me to start? He said, well, next September. I said, well, gosh, it's only 3 months' time. Actually, I'm very happy in Salisbury. I've married there. My wife loves it. We've got a beautiful house and a lovely garden. And the close couldn't be kinder to us. I mean, we like the boys and the men. And we feel very happy. We don't really want to move, but I'll certainly go and see them. So I went down to see them, had a long talk. Again, Canon Briggs was the only person I said. I didn't see the dean or anything, but he had the ability to appoint me. And he said, would you take it? So then Bolt intervened and said, there's another thing that's cropped up recently, that is the City of Birmingham Choir, which is one of the finest choirs in the country, want an organist as well, somebody to conduct them. Would you take that on as well? It's only once a week. So as long as it doesn't interfere with the other job, I'll certainly take it. So they'll pay you 500 a year, and Worcester will pay you 500, it'll be 1,000. But I've never seen 4 figures before in my life. I said, well, it certainly sounds tempting. Then you'll also get extras of various sorts. And the good thing about Worcester is you'll be working each year with Hereford and Gloucester for the Three Choirs Festival. You'll get the very best London orchestras, London Symphony Orchestra, London Philharmonic, English Chamber Orchestra. All the best orchestras come and take their turn. And the best soloists, Isabel Bailey, all those good people who sing so marvellously. You'll be working with them rather than these second-rate people you've been having down Salisbury. He said, take my advice and take it. He said, I say that it'll make you, if you do, you'll get so much better experience. Of course, down in Salisbury you work very well with the people there, but you'll meet anybody. All here you'll meet all the critics, the London critics will be after you, and Birmingham critics will be after you. He said I should move.